hot with NFTs, stock market, and all the other fun things in the world. No, we're just kidding. We are here on DisrupTV, and we're going to do some quick introductions with our awesome guests today. We're going to do inverse order. We're going to go to Sarah, we're going to go to Pat, and then we're going to go to Whitney. Tell us where you're calling in from and what you're talking about today. So, Sarah, where are you joining us from?
Hey everyone, I am joining you from my apartment in San Francisco, California, and I am here to talk today about my new book, Creative Hacks for Curious People.
Woohoo! All right, awesome. Pat, where are you calling in from, and what are we talking about today?
Hi everyone, my name is Pat White. I'm CEO of Bitwave. I'm calling in from San Francisco as well. We got the West Coast contingent on the call today, and we're going to be talking all things NFT, DeFi, crypto, digital assets, business, whatever, everything up and down. It's the crazy new stuff.
All right, and we've got Whitney. Well, what are we talking about today?
Hello, everyone. I'm Whitney Johnson, and I'm calling in from the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia in the United States. Although I did grow up in San Jose. Does that count as a West Coast contingent? And I'm also here. Sarah, you gave me this great idea to talk about my book called Smart Growth. So super excited to be with you all today.
Thank you. Books are out. That is amazing. All right. We'll turn the honors over to Elle. Where do we go?
All right. 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar. I'm the Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce and your co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us on Twitter at DisrupTV Show. Send Ray, myself, our distinguished guests, your questions live using hashtag DisrupTV. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Ray Wang. He's the CEO and founder of Constellation Research. He is the best-selling author of Everybody Wants to Rule the World, Surviving and Thriving in the World of Digital Giants. Ray is a regular television business and technology contributor on Fox Business, Yahoo Finance, CNBC, and Wall Street Journal. He's also a global sought-after keynote speaker, and in my humble opinion, one of the top futurists to follow on Twitter at RWANG0. Welcome, Ray, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot. I'm here with my awesome co-host and co-founder, Vala Afshar. He's the Chief Digital Evangelist for Salesforce. He's also the author of The Pursuit of Social Business Excellence. Executives around the world pay attention to every one of his inspirational and insightful tweets. And when he's not keynoting or hosting or leading events or working with clients at Salesforce, you can find him speaking on business TV outlets such as Bloomberg and posting insightful analyses of this show on ZDNet. So who do we have here to kick it off today? And kicked it off before.
Ray, this is episode 257. We've interviewed almost 800 amazing people. But when we launched the show in 2016, you and I were very deliberate about who would be our first guest. And the criterion was we had to deeply respect this individual, and we wanted to make sure that our audience would benefit most from our first guest. And selfishly, we wanted to kind of launch this show. And so 5 years later, our first guest ever is now kind enough to join us. And by the way, 4 books later. So
4 books later, I think we missed
a busy guest. Whitney Johnson is the CEO of human capital consultancy Disruption Advisors, an Inc. 5000 2020 fastest growing private company in America. One of the 50 leading business thinkers in the world, number 14 is named by Thinkers 50. Whitney and her team are experts at helping people to grow their organizations. Having worked at Fortune 100 companies, been award-winning equity analyst on Wall Street, invested with great late Harvard Clay Christensen, and coached alongside the renowned Marshall Goldsmith, Whitney understands how companies work, how investors think, and how the best coaches coach, all of which she brings to her work in coaching CEOs and C-suite executives. In fact, Marshall Goldsmith from 16,000 candidates picked Whitney as a top 15 coach. Whitney is an award-winning author of Dream, Dare, Do, a brilliant book, Disrupt Yourself. Her third book, Build an A-Team. By the way, they're all behind me. The books that are standing up. And her new book that we're going to spend time talking about, Smart Growth, How to Grow Your People to Grow Your Companies. Whitney has, listen to this, 1.8 million followers on LinkedIn, where she was selected as a top voice in 2020. And her course on fundamentals of entrepreneurship has been viewed by more than 1 million viewers. An amazing follow on Twitter at Johnson Whitney, JOHNSON WHITNEY. Welcome back, Whitney, to DisrupTV.
Thank you. I think I want to take you and Ray with me wherever I go to introduce. You're both awesome. So it's wonderful to be here.
Whitney, I cut your bio to like a third of your achievement, so I apologize. We only have 20 minutes.
It was still too long. It was still too long. Make it shorter.
So, but hey, no, we're so excited to have you here. I mean, you are the global leader talking about personal disruption in general. Let's start there. Let's set a baseline for everybody listening in who might not have heard you before. Talk about what is personal disruption and what that means.
I would be happy to. So personal disruption is this idea of you step back from who you are to slingshot into who you want to be. It's originally based on the work by Clayton Christensen. As Vala mentioned, I had co-founded the Disruptive Innovation Fund with Clayton. I had worked on Wall Street, come across the book, The Innovator's Dilemma, and had this big aha, this big insight that disruption wasn't just about products and services and companies and countries. It was also about people, that you can disrupt yourself. And that if you want to make any meaningful progress in your life, in your career, you do need to be occasionally willing to step sideways, backwards, or down in order to slingshot forward. And so that is what the concept of disruption is. And anybody who's listening, if you really analyze your life, you will realize that you have actually disrupted yourself many times, whether in high school or college or first job, second job, first company, second company. So personal disruption, step back from who you are to slingshot forward.
Whitney, how did you get interested in personal disruption? Certainly you were studying disruptive companies and trying to understand how markets are disrupted, but then you took a deep look and applied some of the science in terms of understanding business disruption to personal disruption. How did that happen?
It's a great question, Vala. And, you know, I have since come to understand that for whatever reason, I have this mini little superpower of I like to take and am good at taking business theories and applying them to the individual. And what happened for me specifically here is that I was working on Wall Street. I had discovered this theory of disruption and saw that this is the early 2000s, that wireless was disrupting wireline. That's why they were beating my estimates. But then the big aha came for me is I had gone to one of my bosses and said, hey, you know, I've been doing this for about 8 years. I'd like to try something new. And he effectively said to me, we like you right where you are. I'd now read The Innovator's Dilemma. I'd had this kernel of an idea that this theory could also be about people. And so within about a year, I basically disrupted myself. I stepped off the top of my mountain or my S-curve and made the decision to become an entrepreneur. So it was really my own lived experience applying this theory or principle to that experience, and realized then as I started to map my life that there had been several instances throughout my career where I had applied this idea or this theory or framework of disruption to myself personally.
That's amazing.
You know, that's a fundamental piece, right? That S-curve that you're talking about, knowing where you are, right? And I don't know, even being brave enough to step off the S-curve. Let's go to the S-curve and talk a little bit about why that's important and how do you know where you are on the S-curve? I mean, that's a pretty hard guess or hard judgment call to make.
Yeah. So while we were investing using the theory of disruption, we were also using the S-curve that was popularized by E.M. Rogers in 1962 to help us figure out how quickly an innovation would be adopted. And as we were investing, again, I thought, maybe we can apply this to people. And the more I looked at it, the more I analyzed it, I realized that this was basically this simple visual model for us to think about, here's what growth looks like. So whenever you start something new, you start DisrupTV. For example, you're at the base of the S, growth is happening, but it doesn't seem to be apparent. And then you move into the steep, sleek back or part of the S where things are moving very quickly. So you've got slow at the launch point, and you've got fast in the sweet spot. And then you get very good at something and you think to yourself, I know I'm good at this, but I can no longer keep doing it. And that's because your growth has slowed down. So you've got slow and then fast and then slow, which is how you grow. And so what you then know is if you know where you are on that curve, whether you're in the launch point, the sweet spot, or mastery, then you increase your capacity to grow. And the reality is that growth is our default setting. And so by having this simple model to think about your growth, it then has implications for talent development, for succession planning, for team configuration, et cetera. But it starts by locating and orienting yourself where you are on that curve.
Throughout your books, some of my takeaways is when you remind us to, fight against sense of entitlement, demonstrate generosity, humility, have a beginner's mindset, because it takes courage, grit to disrupt yourself. It's hard. And some of these folks that you coach are really successful people. They are CEOs, they're founders of companies. So they come to you and say, Whitney, I feel like I'm stuck. What do you tell them? Like, what do you tell an average person who feels that they're stuck, whether they're successful or not, what they can do in terms of daily habits that perhaps can get them unstuck?
Yeah. Oh, Vala, it's such a great question. I think, one of the things that's super helpful, and we saw this just recently, is working with a startup company and administered our S-curve insight tool that allows you as an individual to see where you are on the S-curve, then a leader and a manager to plot where each team member of each of your team members is on the S-curve. And one of the things that happens, Vala, is it gives people a language. So this one company that we were working with, the chief marketing officer, and you used to be a chief marketing officer, was able to say, oh, now I understand why I'm feeling so discontented. Like, I'm feeling like I need to do something new because I'm at the top of my S-curve. I'm very good at what I do. I'm in mastery, but I'm bored and I'm starting to feel like I'm dialing it in. And if I don't jump to a new curve or find a way to extend this out, then I'm going to die inside a little bit. So now that she had this framework to articulate the experience that she was having, she had this artifact that she could use to have a conversation with her manager. And in this particular instance, she left this startup to go be the CMO at a DeFi startup. And I know you're going to talk about DeFi startups in just a minute, but it gives you this language and this framework to describe the experience that you're having. And when you can describe your experience, then you can start to do something about it. So that's the first place that I have people start, is this feeling that you're having that you can no longer do this. This, by the way, is normal. You are in mastery. You're no longer learning. You're no longer enjoying the feel-good effects of learning. So either you're going to find a way to push yourself back down in the sweet spot, or you're going to jump to a new curve.
Awesome. Ray, you're on mute.
I really love this quote that you have called "Growth is learning put into action." And I think that is really, really powerful. And you talk about these 3 steps, these 3 phases in that growth and learning journey, the launch point, the sweet point, and the high end. This is coming from your book, Smart Growth. And I just really thought it was interesting for people to understand what those are, because it's a very hard call. Like, how do you know you're at the top of your game? I certainly know when at the launch point, right?
Yeah.
Right. How do you know when you're top of the game and it's time to hop off?
Okay. So a couple of suggestions for people who are wondering, am I actually in at the high end of the curve or in mastery? So number one, you can start with just basically time and role. So if you've been doing something for several years and nothing has changed, the projects haven't changed, you don't have a new boss, no configuration of the team has changed, that may be a signal that you are in mastery at the top of the curve. But what we have found is that if everyone is coming to you to ask you questions and you're not really asking anybody questions. If you find yourself saying, well, that's not how we do it here, or we've already tried this, or you find yourself feeling a little bit bored, I feel a little bit checked out, feeling like, I think there's more for me. There's more for me to do here on this planet, and it's not going to happen here. Those are all signals for you that it's time for you to either find a way to reconfigure what you're doing so that you can push yourself back into the sweet spot, or you do need to go find something to do. So typically it's the feelings that you're having. Like, the functional job of your work is fine, but there's an emotional sense of, I think there's more. And almost always when people do decide to disrupt themselves and do something new, it's not because the functional job isn't getting done. It's the emotional job of, there's more for me out there.
There's a fulfillment gap.
Yep. Yeah. Great. I love how you said that.
Yeah. My personal experience as a hiring manager is that when I was surrounded by A players, they're intrinsically motivated to grow, personal growth, career growth, grow the company, the team. Your prior book was all about building an A team. Were some of the lessons from the book, Building the A Team, motivate you to write about smart growth. Can you tie the two books together?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love that question, Vala. So in Build an A Team and both in Disrupt Yourself, so Disrupt Yourself was more about the individual, this mechanism for how you make progress, and Build an A Team was how you can configure a team. I know I keep using that word of like, you want to have most of your people in the sweet spot, some in the launch point, some in mastery. But one of the things I discovered is that in both of these books, the S curve of learning was kind of the supporting actor. But in fact, whenever we would go into an organization or deliver a keynote or in our coaching, we would find that this S curve was such a simple visual that people immediately got it. It was an immediate language that they could have to describe and talk about the experience that they were having. And so my motivation here was to say, all right, let's really double click on this and let's talk about, okay, you're at the launch point. What is the experience that you're having? You're an explorer and then you're a collector, and then you go into this sweet spot and you accelerate and then you become a metamorph. And then in mastery, you anchor the new behavior, whatever it is you were trying to do, and then you become a mountaineer because you need to keep climbing. And then looking at the ecosystem and focusing on the individual, but then having implications for leaders. So it was really this sense of, we haven't done this S curve that actually seems to be the leading actor service. And so let's talk about that. And to the idea of smart growth, when you know where you are in your growth, then you increase your capacity to grow. And so that's where the title came from.
Can I just have a follow-up question? You wrote Smart Growth during the pandemic.
Yes.
So the last 20 months, we've all experienced something that we've never experienced in our lifetimes. And now you hear terminology like great resignations.
Mm-hmm.
There's 11 million open jobs, most ever in our, since we've been tracking in the US. And so many people seems like proactively are disrupting themselves. They're reading your books. And because of this decentralized, distributed work environment where the boundaries have been extended to our homes, people seem to have the ability to dare, dream, and do. Your first book. Do you feel that this last 20 months really have accelerated this notion of personal disruption?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's happened is that if you consider prior to COVID, we were all on an S curve, whether we liked it or not. And then COVID came along and it disrupted every single one of us and put us on the launch point of a new S curve. And one of the things that we have discovered is that we are far more resilient than we thought we were. We now have this momentum of, I building up this muscle of being able to disrupt ourselves. And people said, I know how to do this. And I don't really like the S curve that I was on. I want to do something different. And people have the capacity now to make those changes that they want to make. And so I think we're about to go into this tremendous, exciting, thrilling period of post-traumatic stress growth where people are going to say, I want to grow. How do I do it? And smart growth is really meant to help people give you this map of what growth looks like so that you can make the progress that you want to now that you've already had that momentum to make that progress.
Perfect timing.
Let's jump in on that point. Let's jump into that point. Post-traumatic stress growth, new term, PTSD, right? And that's when you're talking about when growth and learning are too fast to keep up with, right? We talked about when it's slow. We talked about leaping. What does that mean in the middle, right? It's going too fast. Like, can I consume it? I'm overwhelmed. Like, what are those feelings like? And what do people need to do?
Yeah. I would say, Ray, actually the too fast is typically at the launch point where it's like, it's too much and you feel like I can't do it. And so that's why everything feels slow because you're not growing fast enough to keep up with what you're trying to do. And if you think about biology and carrying capacity, which we won't go into right now, but in mastery, what's happening is the growth isn't happening fast enough so you can keep up with it. What I love about the sweet spot, and this is why you want to be in the sweet spot as long as possible, it's this place of optimized tension because now it's going fast, but it's not too fast, and it's going slow, but not too slow. And so you're hard, but not too hard, easy, but not too easy. So you're able to keep up. And so that's why it's so exciting because you've got all of your neurons firing and you're like, okay, this is hard, but I can do this. This is really exhilarating and exciting.
That's amazing. I feel like I experienced smart growth in my career in my 40s. So, this is, I think, lessons that I wish I was reading your books in my 20s and 30s. So
Right.
we're getting like a short 20-minute burst right now. So
yeah, right. But amazing book. Highly recommended. You have incredible use cases that you reference in these 3 phases. So again, thank you so much for launching DisrupTV and being gracious and kind to come back. We always learn so much from you. Thank you, Whitney.
Yeah. Oh, thank you both for having me.
Thank you.
Whitney Johnson, founder and CEO at Disruption Advisor, taking enterprise corporate strategy and bring it down to the personal individual level so that it's useful. You can follow her on Twitter at Johnson Whitney. And thank you so much for being on the show. Happy Friday, Whitney.
Yeah. Oh, and you know what? I have to just tell you, everybody, if anybody wants to listen to me interviewing you, Vala, or you, Ray, on my podcast, you can do that too, where we switch the shoes. So anyway, thanks again for having me.
Cross promote. You're up, Vala.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Cheers. One of the biggest thinkers and just the nicest person. So, okay, speaking of big thinkers, and we're going to like deep dive and do it in a slow way. We talk about fast and slow so I can keep up, because these are all emerging new technologies and innovation capabilities. Pat White, CEO of Bitwave. Pat's currently co-founder, CEO of Bitwave, the world's first enterprise digital asset platform, bringing cryptocurrencies, tokens, and other digital assets to the world's largest companies. Bitwave helps with accounting, taxes, AR, PR, secure dApps, and more. Pat was formerly a principal engineer and chief architect at Cisco Spark. Prior to Cisco, Pat was CEO of Sonata, a San Francisco startup that provides enterprise search software to cloud-enabled businesses. He has spent the last decade building software at companies such as Intuit, Microsoft, and a half a dozen other technology companies. You can follow Pat on Twitter at Pat White, Patwhite. Welcome, Pat, to DisrupTV.
Thanks so much, Vala. Oh man, I hate hearing my credentials read like that. It's just I don't know. But awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This should be really, really fun.
Thank you, sir. You've done great work.
Yeah.
You're a trailblazer.
You're doing some great stuff.
You're a trailblazer.
Yeah. Wait. Welcome. And I feel like we talked to you about a few weeks ago in person. So that's kind of good. But you helped kick off one of the most interesting coverage areas where Constellation is going, which is really talking about the metaverse economy. People typically think about the metaverse economy that's happening in the enterprise side. And it's like, what's going on there? It seems to be all consumer. It seems to be like, what does it mean for my business? And we started that conversation. And I thought that was one of the most interesting things. And so let's start there, right? You started a company and it is talking about where we can actually bring some of those things around crypto, DeFi, back into the real world, back into settlement, back into what's happening on the back office end. What is Bitwave?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And that was we'll talk more about the metaverse. I'm excited to get into that because that was such a fun conversation we all had. So Bitwave it's the leading digital asset tax and accounting solution and really back office solution. What I kind of think about for when I wake up in the morning, the thing that we spend every second of the day working on, which I think is always important, like to your guest's last point, like you have to have goals, you have to have these things you're kind of working on in a mission driven sort of way, is that we spend every waking moment thinking literally about how to bring digital assets to enterprises. And it's very mission driven because you have a lot of people in the world thinking about how to bring digital assets, crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, all of these types of things. Now, you'll hear me use the term digital assets a lot, and that's kind of intentional. We could talk about like the marketing side of this because crypto is crypto, but digital assets are this incredibly expansive thing that cover everything from like Bitcoin, Ethereum, but through bonds on the blockchain, NFTs, digital art, the stuff we were talking about, Beeple. It's crazy. So we say like, look at every business in the next 3 to 5 years will have digital assets on their balance sheet, essentially whether they want to or not. Like whether they go and intentionally start in on projects to bring it onto their balance sheet, or they acquire a company, or someone just sends them something, like whatever it is, every business will have digital assets on their balance sheet. And so the question is like, you as a business will either be ready for that, or you either be ahead of the curve or behind the curve. We're talking a lot about curves on this show today. So you're either ahead of the curve, which is like you are ready for digital assets and you're actually getting into it now, or you're going to acquire a company and be in this oh crap moment where you're trying to catch up on actually what all is going on here. So Bitwave is we basically act we we come into businesses, we have a full software solution that will help you go from the blockchain, your exchanges, your custodial systems, into your traditional accounting systems, tax processes, and then up from there. I mean, there's all this cool stuff that hopefully we kind of get into here, but like there's this idea. And I think Ray, this was at the Constellation conference, was that someone said that the first car that ever came out, someone painted a horse head on. And like the way I think about where we are right now with crypto is like we're kind of like painting the horse head on crypto, where like people are figuring out, well, we're gonna do all the same stuff. Everything's totally normal, but instead of you paying me USD in a wire, you're gonna send me an Ethereum transaction. And that's kind of where we are right now. But what's happening is finding all the new ways to use this new technology to enable new business processes. So that's we sit up and down the stack between all of those types of things.
What an amazing place to be, because as you said, early in the game. I'm not even sure if it's the first inning. It may be the national anthem in terms of how early this is. We had Michael Saylor on the show a few months ago, and Michael, who's been leading the discussion in terms of balance sheets holding crypto, specifically Bitcoin. I think he's got about 17,000 Bitcoin on the MicroStrategy balance sheet. At the time he spoke to us, it was about maybe 40 public companies that had crypto on their balance sheet, famously like, Square and MicroStrategy as examples, out of 4,000 or 5,000 public companies. So we're nowhere near, this is less than 1%. And you just mentioned all companies are going to have crypto on their balance sheet, whether it's smart contracts powered by Ethereum or Bitcoin or others. You're talking about, I think Ethereum just crossed 500 billion market cap, and Bitcoin at 1.1, 1.2.
Yep. Overall market cap around 2.6 trillion.
Yeah, overall.
I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
Crazy.
When you talk about, and I think there's over 100 coins that are over a billion market cap. So what is your projection in terms of when do we see, like, I think it was ARK Invest and team under Kathy Wood who said if 10% of public companies carry crypto on their balance sheet, you're going to see immediate, 40% increase in prices across the board. Yeah. And that was early on at analysis. I think it was January 2021. What are your thoughts about how close are we to project to me when 10% of public companies have crypto on their balance sheet? 5 years, 10 years? I'd say 2 years?
Yeah, no, I think we're at 10%. We're in like the 3 year kind of range, to be quite honest. Everyone loves, and I love Kathy on this because everyone loves a good price prediction. Like everyone loves
500,000. She says,
I know. That was my. I was on a podcast at the beginning of this year, and they were like, Pat, give us the prediction, like any prediction you want, like Bitcoin 100K by the end of the year. We'll see if I hit it. I don't know. Like sometimes there's a drawdown in December. I might be a little bit off, but obviously this stuff is going.
It's just people moving to Puerto Rico.
You're going to be close.
Yeah, moving to Puerto Rico.
That's just people moving to Puerto Rico. That's really
now. What's so interesting that's worth kind of talking about though. So Michael Saylor is great. He's done phenomenal things for the industry. I mean, I love what he does in MicroStrategy. But at the end of the day, what's so interesting about him is that he still is fundamentally. It still is a fundamental hedge kind of position. Like he is of the mindset that he's taking inflationary hedge, and that's why he's bought in. There's other pieces there, sure. But what's happening is that is becoming more and more. Not that it's a minority opinion. People still believe Bitcoin is a great inflationary hedge. It's the minority use case. Is that when Procter & Gamble gets into Bitcoin, it's not going to be because their CFO is taking a stance on Fed money printing, posture at this point. It'll be because they're picking up new ways of paying their vendors, new ways of paying up and down their supply chain. So that's what like the next 1,000 companies using crypto are. A percent of them will be bringing on their balance sheet for fun. A much larger percent will be doing it because they are Blizzard, and Blizzard right now. What I like to talk when you step back, Blizzard probably is the largest holder of digital assets on their balance sheet in the world right now in some ways because of the actual assets they have in World of Warcraft and like the swords and the armor and all that kind of stuff. Yep. When those companies start going and NFTizing their assets, that's not an inflationary hedge. That is part of their business. Square, when they start doing settlement, especially international settlement, things like that in digital assets, that's not inflationary hedge. That is actually transacting in it. So the next 1,000 companies are not. It's not going to be the MicroStrategies of the world that are just looking for like investment. It'll be people that are genuinely finding new use cases around this and honestly making money on it. Like, yeah.
Well, and even old school payment companies like buying Pinterest. I mean, think about that. I mean, what are the implications of PayPal buying Pinterest, Pat?
PayPal supporting Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin a year ago. I mean, I would have thought by now an Amazon, a Walmart, e-commerce platforms would jump on supporting just to.
And a big part of that is that it's the biggest issue, and that's also why we started Bitwave, is it's actually a little bit non-trivial to do that. So when you actually want to do this, I won't get too deep in the technicalities, but crypto is essentially this unholy child of tax implications and accounting implications. And so for businesses to actually get into crypto, you have to sort of solve that overall solution that everything you do in crypto is a taxable event. And that's not normal in accounting. Like 99% of the stuff you do in accounting, when you're paying people, you're paying invoices, you're getting paid, none of those things are taxable events from a gain loss perspective. In crypto, it's all taxable. So that's what Bitwave really does, is we basically enable you to do your accounting and your taxes at the exact same time, which enables businesses to seriously think about the actual use cases that you have around this in the long term.
How did you get into this, Pat? How did you get into this? It's you're so far ahead of the rest of the world in terms of thinking about business implication. What
it's such a good question, because so I've been in crypto forever. I'm a big fan of crypto. I wish I bought more. I mean, honestly, I was mining it on my computer back in the day. We all sit here because everyone on this call, I mean, we all heard about crypto 10 years ago.
I was on Bloomberg 2017 talking about, wow, Bitcoin crossed 10,000. What a great, and at that time I should have reminded myself.
I bought it. And so like I had like a little mining rig. I kind of liked it. And it was sort of fun, but it was never part of like, I mean, I didn't have very much, but it was sort of, I always loved it. I love the idea of decentralization. I love the idea of cutting out middlemen. Like that's, if there's one lesson that you hear over and over and over between like every revolution, industrial type revolution we have has been about removing like friction in systems. And so, crypto is just the next net logical step for that. And so for me, it always made sense from the very beginning. I had other jobs and startups and stuff, but I was waiting for, my background is entirely enterprise software. So, every company I worked for was enterprise software. Every startup I've done has been enterprise focused. I was waiting for those two to come together. And honestly, in like, before 2017, it wasn't really coming together. Like the people that were businesses in this space, they didn't pay their taxes. They were not really businesses in this space. And then big businesses were not really in this space. It was 2018 that we really started to see businesses getting serious. We started seeing real people, VC-backed startups getting into crypto. And we're like, crap, they don't know that they're going to need this stuff right now. Like they actually don't realize that they're going to need tax, accounting, all this kind of support stuff. So we started building it up, and it's just been really the pandemic during this time when crypto has just skyrocketed that we've been very fortunate to kind of ride that wave along with it. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, hey, let's talk use cases. Yeah, let's talk use cases. Like, what are the top 3 people are coming to you right now for? Because not all the cases, as you're saying, are like reserved assets, which Fong and Mike Saylor are doing, right? I mean, that's a whole different kind of thing. I mean, that is a hedge. But what are some things that are popping up that people weren't expecting that you're starting to see a pattern for?
Oh my God. Well, let's talk about NFTs. I mean, NFTs are probably like we've signed 5 customers in the last like 2 weeks.
You were just at the conference, right, in New York as well?
Yeah. Yeah. We were just at NFT NYC, which was spectacular. I mean, look at, these conferences are crypto conferences, but like, if there's one request I make for the world is like, don't judge crypto in general by the crypto conferences, because they're a little bit like this conference had me walking around in a sports coat. Like I was walking around sports coat, meeting people from Christie's, and like we're like having serious discussions about this stuff. And next to me is a dude in a gorilla suit just screaming. I'm at a talk, and
it's like Burning Man, South by Southwest mixed.
It's like all of that together, and then like throw in like some like drugs, like more drugs or something. I'm at one of the talks I was at. Honestly, it was so like it was a panel about charity, because a huge trend right now in crypto is people in crypto have been like. It all tends to be kind of millennial age people. They've all are incredibly, I think everyone is very cognizant of how lucky we were to kind of get into this space. So charity has become a huge issue in it. So there's a great panel on charity in crypto, and a lot of the NFT platforms have charity baked in. They have a 1.5%. This is, you're talking about interesting use cases. What people do is they do smart contract based charity, where there's on their smart contract is codified that 1.5%. So every time you interact with it, 1.5% goes to a company. There's one called Giving Block that just does the management and then feeds it out to the charities. I mean, this is, codifying, our best effort from traditional enterprise, for like best effort, we'll do 1% out to charity, to like, no, there's a smart contract and you can guarantee that 1% of their revenue goes to charity. It's amazing. And then, so they had this great panel from those guys. And then next, the host is like, oh, we got a surprise guest. And then Quentin Tarantino comes out on stage.
Wow.
And everyone in the audience is like, what? Is that Quentin Tarantino?
That's awesome.
And then so he starts talking, and he's NFTizing, like he has a handwritten Pulp Fiction manuscript.
No.
And he's telling the story. He's like, so I made Reservoir Dogs, and then I decided to go spend some time in Amsterdam. And while I'm there, I'm handwriting Pulp Fiction. I'm like, I had this vision in my mind of Quentin Tarantino in Amsterdam handwriting this.
Did you shred the manuscript too to make it worth more? I'm just kidding.
That's fancy. That's fancy.
And then all the entire time, there's a guy next to me screaming out, what was in the briefcase? What was in the briefcase? So it's just like it's an incredibly insane world we live in. But all that being said, everything else aside, the money is there. I mean, people just selling another $30 million NFT. Bored Ape Yacht Club was there in force, and it was essentially like the best way to describe it is it's sort of like the digital native version of a country club. Like there was $100,000 pay in to join the Bored Ape Yacht Club right now, where you have to buy one of these NFTs. But once you're in, they do parties. Playboy hosted them on a yacht. They had a taco truck that they sponsored. I mean, it was just like, it's this new way of engaging. And so, the business model behind this that's so interesting is that the business model is essentially you create this smart contract, you create your imaging kind of technology, and then people just go and they interact with the smart contract kind of without your involvement. So they're just sending crypto to the smart contract. That ends up creating a lot of really interesting problems from a accounting standpoint, because you're essentially having to recognize revenue on sort of a continuous basis. And we have customers doing 60 million transactions a month. I mean, that they have to basically take. And the numbers are very quickly
forever. Yeah,
the numbers are very quickly going to dwarf. Like we think of the traditional financial system as like Visa is doing 37 million a year. That's amazing. Like. It's already outpacing that by enormous leaps and bounds here. So that's a great one.
NFT sales in first quarter of 2021, 1 billion in sales. Q3 was over 11 billion. So you saw a 10x multiplier in 6 months. I was following Gary V at the NFT conference. And,
he was there, yeah.
Yeah, his V Friends, which he launched a couple of months ago. I mean, his doodles led to, and he collected thousands of ETH. I was watching. I think he had like 3,000 Ethereum sales of his doodles. But you could go to a V conference. You can have backstage passes. You can have one-on-one mentoring sessions with him. So it's cascading set of value-added services tied to the contract. So it's not just owning a piece of his doodles, but it's
we're living the V life, man.
Living the V life.
Living the V life.
Gary, if you're paying attention, that's the V life. All right.
The V life.
It's incredible. I mean,
anybody who's been following him, I mean, he had this excitement in 2006 talking about Twitter, Facebook, and the social revolution. So he's certainly a pioneer. You were saying, Pat?
It is really incredible. I mean, and all of that is still sort of tied to cultural. I mean, we have customers that are doing bonds on the blockchain. This is where I get really excited. Like we have customers who literally are issuing bonds onto the blockchain today. I talk about this in we in the crypto space talk a lot about financial self-empowerment for individuals. It's a big theme of this is like, banking the unbanked, getting people who would not have access to traditional financial instruments access to them. It goes for businesses too. Like if let's say we're a 20-person company. I call up JP Morgan, like, hey, Mr. Morgan, I want to issue a bond.
Jamie Dimon.
JP, Mr. Dimon, I want to issue a bond. He'd be like, Pat. And then, so like there's actually like, so, but I could go and issue a bond onto the blockchain today and sell it and then service it just like a traditional bond with all the traditional guarantees. And that's actually the way they implement that is through an NFT. So we're starting to see these other stuff happening. Like DeFi is the real revolution from the business side. NFTs are fun. It's great to talk about. It's kind of crazy. There's a revolution brewing where essentially this 3% friction tax that the traditional financial services industry puts on the country writ large is essentially going to start moving more and more and more and more to the blockchain. So it'll start with payments. It'll start with like, instead of paying a $30 wire fee, I'm going to pay 7 cents of DAI for, on the XDAI network for a quick transfer. It'll start going to lending. Like I go and borrow, like I borrowed money or I loan money on the blockchain today. It'll get into investments, buying stock, collateralizing CDOs. I mean, you can go and bet on the weather in Timbuktu a month from now on the blockchain today. So all this stuff that like traditionally you had
Why
to
do we
have
need
complex.
banks again?
Yeah, and if you're a bank, like you got to be scared. Like you got to be super scared about this.
Yeah.
Actually,
My
the
last
most
question,
interesting
Pat,
conversation were the banks. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Vala.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say the most interesting conversation at our conference was the banks. They had mapped everything out. They knew exactly what was going, and they can't do it. There's nothing, and they know where this market's going. It's like they know exactly what's going to happen, and they just can't execute or pull the trigger. It's so interesting having this conversation.
There was 2 times in the conference when I wanted to jump up on stage and yell, which was one was when one of your analysts said that they suggested buying Shiba. And then the other one was
1100% growth in October. So just
it's one of those funny things. Like as a longtime crypto guy, you see these trendy coins come and go. And I always tell people don't like invest in like the good ones. Invest in Bitcoin, Ethereum. Like invest in the foundation layers. Ignore
Cardano, Solana.
Yeah. But then the other one was during the DeFi thing because it was so interesting. It was like they saw without seeing in some ways. Like not to be too harsh on them, but like it really was like. It was like, the whole financial industry, I guess, could just collapse. Yeah. But we have a team.
We'll leave it on that. We'll leave it on that note. Yeah. We're here with Pat White, CEO of Bitwave. He was early on Twitter as well. You can find him at Pat White. I'm sure all the other Pat Whites are really pissed at you. But hey, congratulations. Happy Friday. Look forward to catching up with more conversations with you along the way as we look at the metaverse economy, crypto, and DeFi here on DisrupTV. So thanks a lot for being on the show. Happy Friday.
Thank you, Pat. Right. What a pioneer. I mean, and I think Web 3.0 is going to turbocharge his company, this whole tokenized, decentralized web. Okay, this is the cleanup hitter spot for you baseball folks, where the greatest mind comes and hits a grand slam. And so
the stakes aren't too high in this conversation now for me, Vala. Thanks so much. I really appreciate that.
We have Sarah Stein Greenberg, author of Creative Acts for Curious People, How to Think, Create, and Lead in Unconventional Ways. Our guests actually, remind me of unconventional thinkers and doers. For a decade as executive director, Sarah has helped lead the D.school, an interdisciplinary institute at Stanford that nurtures creative thinkers and doers and help spread the methods of design. In the classroom, Sarah likes to teach at the intersection of design and social impact. Sarah has taught the D.school's foundational class, Design Thinking Bootcamp, an experimental course called Design Thinking for Public Policy Innovators, and a long-running high-impact entrepreneurial design for extreme affordability, whose students have gone on to design products and services, listen to this, Ray, that have helped over 100 million people worldwide. Wow. Talk about putting a dent in the universe. You can follow Sarah on Twitter at Stein Greenberg, SteinGreenberg. Welcome, Sarah, to DisrupTV.
Thanks so much for having me. This is going to be a really interesting sort of bookend from where Whitney was talking about growth and personal change. And then we just had Pat, who is such a amazing example of somebody who is on the leading edge, surrounding himself with all of these opportunities for growth. And I'm excited to talk a little bit more about creativity and kind of how you get there.
That's awesome.
No, this is great, man. I mean, I love the D.school. I remember some of the early folks. I mean, when David Kelly was there, when the IDEO folks were in there. I had a good friend, Chirag Mehta, that was there for some things. I mean, it's just crazy. All the amazing alumni from the D.school. And of course, all the way it's permeated into almost every aspect of our lives in terms of how people view things from that point of empathy. So why did you decide to write the book? I mean, what got you inspired to say, let's go do this? Let's finally put all these ideas and give someone an awesome, quick guide. So,
yeah, I mean, the D.school has now been around for about 15 years, and I've just seen so many people really transform their own ability to have impact and to think creatively using these methods. And so we've been looking for ways for a while to figure out how do we actually get that out to more people? And the reality is we're actually known for a very, very small subset of what we teach to students. So this book is an attempt to try to collect some of the best thinking and best ideas from the D.school and really get it out there.
That's awesome. I think this is attributed to Albert Einstein, creativity is intelligence having fun. Sounds like you had a lot of fun writing this book. And can you tell us about what is the takeaway? What's the unique message in your book that you want your readers to walk away with?
Yeah, well, first of all, I love that quote because I am all about like tackling serious problems while having fun. I actually think those two things go hand in hand. So, there's a couple of things. One is at the D-School, we learn by doing. And that is what I hope people can take away from this book is like, you can read, you can get interesting insight and inspiration, but the process of actually developing your own skills as a creative person, it's all about trying new things and practicing these new behaviors. So all of the activities in here are structured in such a way that if you're on your own, if you're trying to lead a team to be more creative, like there are practices that you can try right away or that you can spend, weeks or months on. But I also want to say that I think creativity and kind of strengthening our own creative abilities has a particularly important role to play at this moment in history, right? Like who among us in the past 20 months has not been faced almost on a daily basis with trying to solve problems that we weren't trained for, that nobody's seen before, there is no manual for. And so like, what do you do when you're faced with those kinds of challenges routinely? Well, you have to, you can't, especially if you're in a leadership role or in a business context, you can't just get stuck and do nothing. So you have to have a way to address the kind of uncertainty. And I actually think that design and creative practice is one of those ways, right? Because in design, what we learn is how to show up at a new problem that we haven't seen before and how to behave as a learner, how to put that learning into action, and how to try things, how to test things through prototyping to actually see what the response is. So it is a reliable way to confront problems in times of great uncertainty. And that is really the underlying message of this book is that you need a way to act even when things are uncertain, and that these kinds of practices can really help you do so.
You know what I'm doing in retirement? I'm coming back as a SimSys major, and I'm going to jump into D-School. I mean, that's really my retirement plan.
Anytime, you are welcome.
Tell me in. I'm in Cupertino. I'm in. But the beauty of this is, right? I mean, you took some of those exercises, and I remember, you basically help people figure out how to talk to strangers. Let's take one of those exercises. It's one of my favorite ones because you're coming in without any context and you've got to figure out what to do. So how does talk to strangers work?
Yeah, I mean, Talk to Strangers is this amazing assignment that was developed actually by this brilliant woman named Erica Estrada. She noticed that over time, actually, students are less and less comfortable just approaching strangers or engaging, with the world without some kind of mediation. We're now teaching the whole generation of digital natives, right? So this is a great example of stretching our pedagogy and our tools to help people actually interact with things that could actually provide new insight and new inspiration, right? Like if you're in design or if you're in entrepreneurship and you don't get out of the way that you yourself interacts with the world and you understand and interpret in your own personal experience, you are very likely to be designing only for yourself, right? So you actually need a way to let in some strangeness, let in some newness. So How to Talk to Strangers is like a 3 missions that you go on. You practice literally just walking down the street and smiling at people and see what happens, right? And
it's so hard.
It's so hard,
people look
right?
at you so funny when you do this.
But you can actually tell, even if someone's wearing a mask, you can tell if they're smiling or not. And that actually initiates a kind of nonverbal conversation that's quite powerful. So that's step 1. Step 2, you go up and you start a conversation about anything, right? So you can use this practice of triangulating, use any object that's in the environment. It's like, those apples are in season. Like, where did you get those, right? Anything where did you find that book? That's so interesting. And then the 3rd mission is to actually ask someone for directions and see if they would be willing to give you their phone number so you can text them if you get lost. And see, can you actually develop a real rapport that results in somebody being willing to help you a little bit? And that is a nicely scaffolded set of increasing challenges, right? But
there's a little bit of occupational hazard there. My friend did get slapped by someone.
Well, that might have had to do perhaps with how your friend made that request.
Right?
Right.
The other guy thought he was hitting on him, so that was a problem.
Totally, right? So, but that's actually a great lesson, right? Is what is the social convention there that person is breaking? And actually maybe that person would have had better luck, being in a pair, right? we have those same
Yes.
issues come up as designers when we're interviewing people, when we're engaging with people. If we're going to go talk to somebody about a sensitive health topic, right, it actually really helps if like somebody in the pair has some real health experience, right?
Yeah.
So but exactly, Ray, what you just said, like those are the experiences we want students to have in a kind of safe environment, right?
Safer,
It's
controlled
fairly low
environment.
risk.
Yeah.
It builds your muscles and your understanding of how you're going to do this work even better once you're working on and tackling real projects. So, you know, how to talk to strangers, it's just like one of those necessary preparations to engage with the world in a way where you can like read people, you can connect with people, and in doing so, you start to actually get insight. It's the very, very first step to trying to understand and learn and empathize with where people are coming from, which takes you into this whole area of human-centered design.
That's amazing. Speaking of developing those muscles, and boy, I could have used this class as an introvert, someone who constantly fighting imposter syndrome. It's difficult for me to speak with strangers, even now, to be honest with you. But as an athlete, you sometimes hear coaches say you can't teach speed. So do you believe everyone has the ability to learn creativity, regardless of their age?
You know, I think everybody is fundamentally creative, but a lot of us have been kind of had that aspect of us a little bit devalued. And I think that's coming from a couple places. So one is, you know, we just have this persistent myth in our society, and you'll hear David Kelly talk about this a lot, where, you know, people who they can't draw also think they're not creative, right? We've had this tight coupling between the visual arts and people's sense of themselves as creative people. So one thing is we got to get rid of that myth. And actually at the D.school, you know, as you know, we have students from the med school and all parts of engineering and business and law and education. They're all taking classes together because each of those areas, I mean, as we just heard in terms of digital finance, like that, we know that creativity is necessary in all different sectors, right? So that myth, I think, is really something that we need to knock down. But the other thing is that like this kind of work is not just as simple as like sitting around and just thinking great thoughts, right? There actually are these quite rigorous practices. And for some of us, like if we're an introvert, you know, like you actually need to build some skill and muscle. One of those areas that we see really important for people to understand and to develop in is around like, okay, you've got an idea, you think it's good, but does anybody else think it's good? How do you actually build a prototype really rapidly, and in what medium, to be able to express that idea, to give it form, and to then be able to have other people experience it so they can give you feedback, right? Most people are not, you know, unless you're coming from an engineering background, like that is a pretty strange concept to many people. And so that's another whole, you know, set of practices in the book. So like one of my favorites, for example, is an exercise called First Date, Worst Date that my colleague Carissa Carter created. You literally have people build a representation of their worst first date out of Legos, right? And then you share, right? And people do it in all different ways. You hear some really interesting stories. But the cool thing about that is it's like the first time somebody might have been asked to build a physical representation of an abstract experience. And that underlying skill is going to serve them well the next time they're going to say like, okay, how do I test this concept that I have about financial services, or about how I might improve the healthcare experience in my doctor's waiting room, right? So there are all of these possible futures that we can design, but we often need ways to make them concrete and then to be able to get into a good dialogue with someone else about them.
That's amazing.
You know, Vala, I don't want to wait till next year to invite Sarah to come speak at our conference. We're going to have to do something earlier.
You know, it's funny you were saying that. I was thinking, how do I take the course? I need to take
I want to
courses.
take this course.
You know,
well, the first thing you could do,
date, but I do definitely want to take the course.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and I'll say like one of the things I was trying to do in the book is like, you know, all of these learning experiences, they are quite emotional, right? Because like you are either overcoming a fear or you're like reaching a new height. And that is what I try to do in this book, is like really bring that aspect of it to life. And the fun, the playfulness is in there, but also like the struggle that can come from being part of it. But
and that's also a great team building and bonding moment, as well as you get your teams up and running as well. So it seems very powerful. We have an ambient experience summit, which we try to think about. We bring creative customer experience, customer facing, front facing kind of executives together. So it's something like that. But you're also a product of the D.school. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like how do you, I mean, you took some of the earliest classes there. What inspired you to do that? And now I mean, you're basically like putting this into action for millions of people.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot say how lucky I was that I happened to be at the business school as a grad student when the D-School was getting started. So I took some of those early classes, and, just it was clear that everybody there was in a highly experimental mode, right? There was this amazing group of faculty who came together to found the D-School, with David Kelly. And, like, it was the first time a lot of them were in the classroom together. You could, as a student, you could see them like disagreeing and trying to figure out, like, how are we gonna actually teach these skills and these concepts. And I think that was, I mean, obviously it was a really pivotal moment in my life. And I had those first, early experiences of designing something that, using these approaches, actually was useful to people, right? So one of my first projects was around designing and actually taking a bunch of the cost out of a product that was for small plot farmers in Myanmar, working really closely with this amazing organization called Proximity Designs around irrigating their fields, around pumping water. Right. So, like, I didn't have an agricultural background, but through these methods, we were able to actually design something that, 6 months later, our partner was already testing and had started manufacturing. So I early on, like, saw the efficacy of working in this way. And I think, just for me personally, like, I love being at intersections. Like, I love that kind of crazy overlap when you've got people who are trying to, speak each other's languages, but there's, like, lots of room for creative misinterpretation. Those kinds of open-ended, ambiguous kinds of challenges and environments, they really appeal to me for some reason.
That's awesome. I
That's
think it was
amazing.
Seth Godin who said,
farm tech in action. So
yeah, absolutely. I think it was Seth Godin who said, people are not afraid of failure, they're afraid of blame. So I feel that you need to have courage in order to practice creativity. I'm a first generation immigrant refugee, so I already had the most disruptive thing that can happen to anyone, in my opinion, early on in my life. So I think it built a certain amount of grit and resiliency in me. So throughout my career, I did some unconventional things where I think, the courage for my family and the experience led to me not worrying about blame if I felt it was the right thing to do, and I would do it. Now, my kids grew up in the U.S., great life, knock on wood. So I often think about, they didn't go through a challenging period in their life. So, will they have the resiliency? Will they have the grit to practice creativity, even if it means going to uncharted territories where they're trailblazers? How do you help? How do you advise business leaders to cultivate a creative culture by not blaming failures, but also individuals who may be timid in terms of really reaching their full creative potential?
Yeah, I mean, you're naming some really important aspects of creative work, but also about the culture that leaders need to build within organizations. And, I think at the heart of this is what we were kind of talking about a little bit before, which is about, how do you work with the uncertainty and the ambiguity that is around you? And you can kind of say, like, wow, I can't tolerate it. I gotta get out of this uncertainty and ambiguity as quickly as possible. Or I see that when something is ambiguous, like a fast emerging technology or a new industry that's getting going, that's actually a moment where, if we stay in the ambiguity a little bit longer, we might actually notice the really important and the really powerful opportunity that's there. And I think that design, because it is a way of structuring a response to ambiguity through prototyping, through being able to be divergent and explore multiple directions at once, and it has that vocabulary where you can name, no, we're deliberately preserving our options right now. And now, actually, because of the user feedback that we've gotten, we're in a convergence mode, right? We're actually going to move something, to market. That helps a team become more confident about what are the implications of being in that ambiguous space. And the last thing I'll just say is that, once you get a handle on how you personally relate to ambiguity, and also how you then can apply, what are the right creative skills to use at that moment to kind of get to the next step, then you actually start to want it, right? Because if you're in an ambiguous problem space, you're next to a breakthrough, right? And if you're not, actually, you're probably in pretty conventional territory. But that takes some of the personal work that you're alluding to, particularly if you have not experienced in your life what that means to navigate that kind of uncertainty. And I think that is part of the culture that leaders need to build. How do we hold this ambiguity? How do we invite ambiguity in when that's right for where we are in terms of our
Sarah, grand slam. The way you like tied the narrative from Whitney and Pat and really brought it all together. Oh my God. Unbelievable. You're awesome.
Thanks. I'm a synthesizer. I like those intersections.
I have one last question for you. I mean, you're working with the greats, David, Kelly, you're among Grace Hawthorne, you're amongst Alida, Hayes, Frederica, I mean, and a whole bunch of other folks. What's it like when they all get together?
It's so fun. It's so fun. We have so much fun in our culture, right? Because and really we're pushing it, right? Alida is an incredible choreographer and dancer, right? She gets our students to think about movement and improvisation and how that relates to creative work, right? Frederick's in the classroom. He's talking about, be like as the innovation evangelist at Google, right? So it's like we're bringing together these incredibly disparate disciplines. And again, that's where all the interesting work happens. It's where the interesting new ideas happen. And we're getting students confident about how do you operate, how do you move amongst all those different disciplinary cultures.
Amazing.
This is wonderful. Thank you for this moment in time where Sarah Stein Greenberg, author of Creative Acts, for curious people, how to think, create, and lead in unconventional ways. You can follow her on Twitter at Stein Greenberg. Awesome book. Check out the exercises. Get the Audible version as well. It is amazing. So thanks a lot for being here. Happy Friday.
Thanks, everybody. Really nice to see you both. Bye.
We'll see you in the green room if you're still around. So take care.
That was a ridiculous hour of
grand slam home run all the way from the beginning to end. Oh my God.
They all tied together. I mean, from the S-curve learning and deliberate disruption, personal disruption, to Pat, who went from Cisco to an area that's so new, so early, bringing all these concepts back to the enterprise through governance and taxation and so on and so forth. And then Sarah just really linking all of this together in terms of the power and the importance of creativity. I know what I'm doing this weekend. I'm just rewatching the show. I'm rewatching the show. So,
we're a rockstar episode. I wish we could just watch the show. It'd be more fun.
right. I don't want to think about the next question. I just want to deeply listen to the answers.
We've got an awesome set of lineup for episode 258. Who do we have?
We have Dory Clark, another Thinkers 50 brilliant mind, professor at Duke University, Fuqua School of Business, and Wall Street Journal best-selling author of The Long Game. The book is behind me, yellow cover, Long Game. So we're going to talk about how you can deliberately build a forward-looking plan for success. We have Joel Smith, Chief Experience Officer of First Advantage. And we're going to talk about the experience being as important as the product and service your company provides. And Liz Wiseman, another Thinkers 50, author of Impact Players, How to Take the Lead, Play Bigger, and Multiply Your Impact. Ray, we can't have multiple Thinkers 50 on one episode. My brain cannot handle it. Elle, our producer, don't do this to me. Right now, I'm fried.
We're fried for the rest of the day. Now, this is awesome. But hey, thanks everyone for joining. If it's Friday, it's DisrupTV, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, every Friday. Thank you so much for listening. And of course, please share, and share your ideas for our next set of speakers as we start booking into February and March 2022. So thanks a lot for making this one of the top enterprise tech podcasts, and really about what's happening in the culture and social world of enterprise. So thanks a lot, everybody. Happy Friday.
Bye, everyone.